Dusty Creek wasn't much of a town. A couple of dusty streets, a diner that opened too early, a feed store that closed too late, and a church bell that still rang every Sunday morning whether folks showed up or not. Out on the edge of town, where the fields started stretching wide, Ethan Miller kept his farm running. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who talked much. Most days, his shirt was soaked in sweat before noon, his hands caked in soil, and his back bent from lifting more than he should. His wife Anna kept the house steady, quiet strength in her eyes, though sometimes you could see the tiredness weighing her down. Their boy Jack was 9 and full of questions about the world. And then there was Duke. Duke was a German shepherd, big frame, sharp eyes, ears always alert. He'd grown up on that farm, just like Jack. Wherever the boy went, Duke followed. Sometimes Jack would be out in the pasture, poking around with a stick, and Duke would circle him like a bodyguard. If a stranger walked by the fence line, Duke would plant himself between them and the boy, teeth bared just enough to remind folks this land wasn't theirs. That farm meant something. It wasn't just soil and wood, it was the last piece of Ethan's father. Ethan could still remember the old man's voice. This land keeps you alive, you take care of it, and it'll take care of you. Those words stayed with him. Selling it was never an option. But Dusty Creek wasn't the same anymore. In recent years, one man's name had started to come up to Offenbrecht fair and rich, polished shoes, fancy trucks, and a way of talking that made your skin crawl. Folks said he owned half the county already, buying up small farms and squeezing out anyone who stood in his way. The land he couldn't buy, he found another way to take. Late one afternoon, Ethan stood on his porch with Duke by his side. The air was stew, heavy, and the horizon shimmered with heat. Down the dirt road, a black SUV rolled up slow. Not many vehicles like that came through Dusty Creek. The car stopped right in front of the Miller farm. Bradford stepped out. His suit was too sharp for a place like this, and his smile was too polished. Duke's ears shot up. He let out a low growl, the kind that came from deep in the chest. Ethan didn't tell him to stop. Ethan. Milla, Bradford said, slick voice carrying across the yard. I think it's time we talked about this land of yours. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans, steadying his breath. Anna came to the doorway, Jack peeking from behind her. Duke moved a step forward, muscles tense. For a moment, it felt like the whole farm held its breath. Ethan didn't know what Bradford was going to say next, but he knew one thing for sure. Trouble had finally found its way to his door. Bradford didn't waste time. He walked up the porch like he owned the place, polished shoes tapping on the dry boards. Ethan stood tall, his boots planted, Duke a step ahead with his shoulders stiff, a low growl already rumbling in his chest. Fine-looking dog, Bradford said with a slick smile. But I didn't come here to talk about dogs. Ethan didn't answer. He just watched, his face set. Bradford pulled a folded paper from his jacket. I came with an offer. I want your land, and I'll pay more than it's worth. Cash it. Today, you can walk away a rich man. Anna's hand gripped the doorframe. Jack, pressed against her side, peered out from behind her skirt. Duke barked once, sharp and loud, making Bradford stop mid-sentence. Ethan didn't even glance at the paper. Not for sale. Bradford chuckled, shaking his head as if he'd heard this 100 times before. Everyone says that at first, but let me explain. The Petersons, the Grants, even the Millers down the road, they all sold. And you know what? They're better off. Less back-breaking work, more money in their pocket. That's their choice. Ethan said, voice flat. This land isn't leaving my family. The smile faded a little. Bradford stepped closer, his cologne mixing with the dry summer air. Ethan, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Take the money. Move your family somewhere better. Think about your boy. Think about your wife. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Anna. She held Jack tighter, her knuckles white, like she could shield him from the man standing outside. Duke pressed forward until his chest brushed Ethan's leg, teeth flashing. I said no, Ethan said, voice like gravel. For the first time, Bradford's jaw twitched. He leaned in, lowering his voice. You think you're standing on principle, but what you're really doing is painting a target on your back. And out here, targets don't last long. He straightened, adjusted his jacket, and turned back toward the black SUV waiting at the end of the drive. But just before climbing in, Bradford dropped something onto the porch, a plain white envelope. He looked over his shoulder with that polished smile again. Think it over. Think of your family. The SUV's engine roared as the dust kicked up, but Duke wasn't done. The shepherd broke free with a sudden leap, charging toward the vehicle. His jaws snapped down on the rear tire, teeth sinking into the rubber. SUV jolted forward, the driver swerving to break free. A long tear ripped across the tire wall before Duke let go, barking furiously as the car sped away. Bradford sat in the back seat, watching through the tinted glass, his smile tight now. For the first time, there was something else in his eyes, annoyance, maybe even a flicker of fear. Back on the porch, Anna bent to snatch up the envelope, her hands trembling. She opened it quickly. Stacks of bills stared back at her, crisp and cold. On top was a slip of paper, 3 words scrolled in neat handwriting. Think of your family. Her face went pale. She shoved it at Ethan as if the thing itself burned. Ethan, we can't just... Before she could finish, Ethan snatched the envelope, walked straight into the kitchen, and without hesitation tossed it into the wood stove. Flames licked the bills, curling them to ash in seconds. He didn't look back until it was gone. When he returned to the doorway, Anna was still holding Jack tight against her chest, her eyes darting to the road like Bradford might come back any second. Duke paced in front of them, chest heaving, ears up, every muscle on edge. Anna's voice cracked. He's not going to stop. You saw his eyes. He won't let this go. Ethan put a hand on Duke's head, steadying himself as much as a dog. Then neither will I. Jack looked up, wide-eyed. Dad, why does he want our land so bad? Ethan crouched so he was eye level with his boy. He wanted to soften the truth, but there was no soft way to say it, because some men think they can take whatever they want. But this land isn't his. It was your granddad's, it's ours, and someday, it'll be yours. Jack swallowed hard and nodded, though his eyes stayed clouded. That night, the farm was quiet, but no one slept easy. Anna kept checking the window, pulling Jack closer whenever he stirred. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Duke outside, pacing the porch. Every few minutes the dog stopped, barking into the darkness, a warning carried on the night air. Ethan closed his eyes, but Bradford's words echoed anyway. Targets don't last long. The sun came up heavy the next morning, burning through the thin curtains of Ethan's farmhouse. He hadn't slept more than an hour. Every time his eyes closed, Bradford's words and that cursed envelope came back. Out on the porch, Duke had kept watch all night. When Ethan stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, the shepherd rose instantly, tail stiff, eyes fixed on the dirt road, like he knew trouble was coming. Ethan scratched his head, staring at the horizon. Dusty Creek had always been quiet. Folks minded their own business. But Bradford's shadow stretched further than most people wanted to admit. By noon, the first sign showed up. 2 black pickup trucks rolled slowly past the Miller farm. They didn't stop, didn't wave, just crawled by, engines low, windows tinted. Anna froze when she saw them from the kitchen window. Jack pressed his face to the glass. Who are they, Dad? Jack asked. People who don't belong here, Ethan muttered. Duke barked loud, chasing the trucks along the fence line until they disappeared in a cloud of dust. That night, someone cut the fence on the north pasture. A dozen cattle wandered loose. Ethan and Jack spent hours rounding them up under the pale moonlight, Duke darting back and forth to herd them, and Ethan's blood boiled with every step. This wasn't kids fooling around. This was a message. By the time they dragged the last steer back, Anna was waiting with a lantern. Her face was pale. This is only the beginning, isn't it? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. 2 days later, it got worse. Ethan went into town for supplies. The hardware store, the feed shop, even the bank. Suddenly, people who had known him all his life wouldn't meet his eyes. Mr. Lawson, who used to give Jack free candy, just shook his head when Ethan asked about a loan for new fencing. I'm sorry, Ethan, Lawson whispered. You know how it is. Bradford's name carries weight. Ethan slammed his hand on the counter. So you'll just roll over? Let him buy everything out from under us? Lawson flinched. It's not me you should be mad at. You're fighting a man who already owns half this county. Folks are scared. On the way back, Ethan felt those stares. Men standing outside the saloon, women at the diner window, everyone looking at him like he was already a dead man walking. When he reached home, Duke ran up to the truck, barking sharp. Ethan noticed the barn door swinging open. He jumped down and rushed inside. The air stank of kerosene. In the corner, a small fire smoldered in a pile of hay, only half dead from lack of air. Someone had tried to burn him out. Ethan stomped the embers until they hissed. His chest heaved. That son of a... Anna grabbed his arm, shaking. Ethan, if we stay, they'll kill us. He looked at her, really looked. The dark circles under her eyes. The way Jack clung to her skirt. Scared, silent, his fists clenched. That's what he wants. For us to run. Anna's voice broke. And what if staying means Jack grows up without a father? The question hung there like smoke. That evening, Thomas showed up. The old war veteran parked his rusty truck out front and walked slow, cane tapping the ground. Duke's ears twitched, but he didn't growl. He knew Thomas. Ethan poured him coffee. At the table, Thomas sipped once, then set the mug down. Words out. Bradford's putting pressure on you. Word travels fast, Ethan muttered. Thomas leaned back, eyes sharp under his wrinkled brow. You think you're the first man to say no to him. You're not, but you might be the first with a spine to hold out. Ethan frowned. What are you saying? Thomas tapped the table. Bradford's scared of that dog of yours. Saw it in his eyes the day he came. Folks whisper he's got something in his past. Something Duke reminds him of. Ethan glanced out the window. Duke was lying in the yard, but his head was up, always watching. What kind of past? Thomas shook his head. Only thing I know is Bradford doesn't fight fair. He'll send men. He'll starve you out. He'll burn you out. But if you really stand, others might find their courage too. Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe this town still had fight left. But when he looked at Anna, her face drawn tight with fear, doubt gnawed at him. That night, the trucks came back. This time, they didn't just drive by. They stopped at the end of the drive, headlights burning holes in the dark. Engines idled. No one got out. They just sat there, waiting. Duke went wild, barking and lunging at the gate, teeth flashing. Ethan stood on the porch with his shotgun in hand. Hours passed before the trucks finally rolled away. But the message was clear. Bradford wasn't done. He was just getting started. Ethan didn't sleep. At dawn, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood, shotgun leaning against his chair. Anna came in, pale, hair tied back loosely. She set down a cup of coffee in front of him. Ethan, she whispered. How long can we live like this? He looked at her, then at Jack asleep on the couch. Duke curled protectively at his feet. As long as it takes, Ethan said. His voice was steady, but inside he wasn't sure if that was the truth or a lie. The morning after the trucks idled outside his gate, Ethan knew it was only a matter of time. Bradford wouldn't wait forever. He wanted a show of power, something the whole town could see. By mid-afternoon it came. 2 trucks barreled down the dirt road, dust clouds chasing their tires. Ethan was out fixing the north fence line with Jack when he heard the engines. His gut twisted. Jack, he said, boy's shop. Get back to the house. Now. The boy froze. But, Dad, go. Jack ran, Duke sprinting alongside him like a shadow. Ethan grabbed the worn shotgun he kept in the tool rack and stood his ground. The truck screeched to a stop in front of the gate. 4 men jumped out, thick arms, shaved heads, leather jackets. That didn't belong in a farming town. They carried pipes, chains. One of them even had a baseball bat with tape around the handle. Afternoon, Miller, the tallest, sneered. Bradford says you're still not seeing reason. Ethan kept the shotgun low but ready. This is my land. You've got no right here. The man laughed. We're not here to argue. Just thought we'd encourage you to make the smart choice. He swung the bat against the fence post, splintering the wood. The others jeered. From the porch, Anna shouted, Leave us alone. Stay inside. Ethan backed back without turning his head. One of the thugs started toward the house. That was a mistake. Duke exploded across the yard, fur bristling, teeth bared. He launched straight at the man's leg, jaws locking onto his calf. The man screamed, stumbling backward as Duke shook with a savage growl. Get the damned dog off me. He howled. Another thug swung his chain. But Duke was quicker. He released, dodged, then snapped again, sinking teeth into the man's arm this time. Blood sprayed. Ethan raised the shotgun. Enough, he roared. The barrel tracked each man. In turn, next one who steps forward. I put him down. The leader grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. He could see it. Ethan wasn't bluffing, and Duke wasn't stopping. The shepherd stood between them on the porch, teeth gleaming, a low rumble vibrating from his chest. You think a mutt's gonna save you? The leader spat. This ain't over. He jerked his head toward the trucks. Load him up. We'll let Bradford know the dog bites. But when one thug tried to move toward Duke, the shepherd lunged again, forcing them back. Ethan took a step closer, finger tightening on the trigger. You're not taking him, Ethan said flatly. Not today. Not ever. For a moment, no one breathed. Dust hung in the hot air, the only sound Duke's deep growl. Finally, the leader raised his hand. Fine, keep your damn dog. But you just made things worse. Miller, much worse. They dragged their injured men into the trucks and peeled out, spitting gravel. Silence settled heavy on the farm. Ethan lowered the shotgun, hands trembling. Duke trotted back, muzzle stained red. But his eyes were calm. He sat at Ethan's feet like nothing had happened. Anna rushed out, clutching Jack. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. Ethan, they'll come back. I know, Ethan said. He knelt, resting a hand on Duke's back. The dog's chest still heaved, but he leaned into Ethan's touch. But they'll know we're not easy prey. That night, Dusty Creek buzzed with whispers. Word of the fight spread faster than fire on dry grass. Some said Ethan had lost his mind, others said Bradford would bury him for real this time. But in hushed corners of the diner and the feed store, something else flicked admiration. People had seen the Miller farm as already lost. Now, they weren't so sure. Thomas showed up again, sitting on the porch with Ethan long after sunset. The old veteran smoked his pipe, eyes thoughtful. "That dog of yours," Thomas said finally. "He's more than muscle, he's spirit. Folks out there, they're scared. But today, they saw a line drawn, a man and his dog standing against Bradford's men. That matters." Ethan shook his head. "They won't join me, not yet. Bradford owns their debts, their jobs, half their lives." Thomas puffed smoke into the night. "Maybe, but courage spreads, Ethan. Sometimes it starts with one bite." Ethan looked down at Duke, lying at his boots. Jack had fallen asleep on the porch swing, Anna rocking him gently. The farm was quiet again, but Ethan knew it was just the calm before the storm. Bradford wouldn't forgive humiliation, and Ethan had just given him reason to strike harder. That same night, far across town, Bradford paced inside his mansion. The injured thug sat with a bandaged leg, wincing. "A damn dog," Bradford snarled. "You're telling me you let a farmer and his mutt run you off?" The thug stammered. "It's not just a dog, boss. It's trained, like military trained thing's a demon." Bradford's fist slammed the table. He turned toward the window, staring out at the endless land he already owned. That dog, that family, that piece of dirt, he wouldn't stop until it was his. His voice was cold, almost a whisper. "If Miller wants a war, then a war he'll get." The morning after the town meeting, Dusty Creek felt quieter, but a new tension hung in the air. Ethan was stacking firewood outside when a small envelope landed at the doorstep. He picked it up, heart tightening. No return address. Inside a single sheet of paper. "Jack is ours. For now, think carefully about defying us." Ethan's blood ran cold. He looked at Anna, whose hand shook as she held Jack. The boy sensed something wrong, clutching his mother's dress, eyes wide. Duke's ears went flat. The shepherd growled, low and warning. He stayed close to Ethan, nose twitching, muscles coiled like springs. Anna whispered, "We have to call the sheriff." Her voice wavered. "He won't just take Jack, will he?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "We're not waiting for anyone else. We're getting him back ourselves." By mid-morning, Ethan was mounted on his truck, Duke riding shotgun, or rather, leaping across the cab like a shadow. Ethan had pieced together the route. The kidnappers had left tracks leading to an old abandoned barn on the edge of town. The wind carried the scent of hay and horses. Ethan gripped the wheel, Duke's growl vibrating in the confined space. Jack's small hand was tucked under Ethan's arm, trying to stay calm, trusting, out on the dirt road. The kidnapper's truck appeared ahead, slow and deliberate. Ethan followed, engine rumbling, like a drum. His heart pounded with every bump and turn. Duke's hackles rose. He barked sharply, a warning to both Jack and their prey. Ethan muttered, "Hold on, buddy. We're coming for him." The barn loomed, shadows pooling under the broken roof. Ethan jumped down, Duke at his heels. Inside, Jack was tied to a post, dirt smudged on his cheeks, eyes wide but brave. 4 men turned, weapons raised. Ethan charged, swinging a crowbar he'd grabbed from the truck. Duke lunged, teeth snapping, barking ferociously. Chaos erupted. The men stumbled back, panicked by the sudden attack of dog and man. One swung a stick at Ethan, but Duke intercepted, biting the man's arm. Another tried to grab Jack, but Ethan tackled him to the ground. The sound of growls, shouts, and fists hitting wood filled the barn. Jack scrambled free in the confusion. Ethan scooped him up, tucking him into his chest. Duke, bleeding slightly from a gash on his shoulder, still circled, protecting them, eyes blazing. The kidnappers fled into the fields, yells echoing behind them. Ethan collapsed to one knee, Jack clinging to him, tears streaking his dirt-smeared face. Duke limped forward, nuzzling Ethan's hand. Panting but alive, Anna arrived moments later, running through the dust. Eyes wide with fear, she fell onto Ethan and Jack, holding them both tight. "Oh my God, you're safe." Ethan looked down at Duke, blood matted in his fur, and then at his son. His chest tightened, fury and relief colliding. He whispered, almost to himself, "We won't run, not anymore. Bradford, you've crossed the line. This ends now." Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the battered barn and the small family standing together. Dusty Creek, once heavy with fear, now held the quiet promise of resistance. Duke, barked once, sharp and clear. It was a warning, yes, but also a signal. They were ready, and for the first time, Ethan felt the spark of vengeance and courage burning steady, unyielding. The night was cold, the kind that cut through jackets and settled into bone. Ethan had spent the evening boarding up the barn windows, checking the locks twice. The town meeting had shifted things, sure, but it also painted a bigger target on his back. Bradford didn't like to lose face, and everyone knew it. Anna tucked Jack into bed earlier than usual. She kept glancing at the window, every creak of the old farmhouse making her flinch. "It's too quiet," she whispered as Ethan slid his boots off by the door. Duke paced near the entryway, tail stiff, ears pricked. The shepherd hadn't settled once all evening. He seemed to know what was coming before Ethan did. By midnight, the silence broke. Tires crunched on gravel, faint but closing in. Headlights swept across the edge of the property, then blinked out. Ethan grabbed the shotgun from behind the door. "Stay inside. Lock the bedroom door," he told Anna, voice steady but tight. She hesitated. "Ethan, now," he cut her off. "Take Jack. Don't open it unless you hear my voice." Anna nodded, pulling their son close. Her eyes lingered on him for just a second too long before she disappeared down the hall. The front porch groaned under heavy boots. A voice hissed in the dark. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Miller, Bradford's men. Ethan aimed at the door, every nerve on fire. Before he could act, Duke sprang forward, lips curled back in a snarl. The dog's growl filled the house like a warning siren. The door crashed open. 2 men rushed in with bats, another with a crowbar. Shadows swallowed the room, broken only by the glint of steel. Duke hit the first man before he even cleared the doorway. The shepherd's teeth sank deep into his forearm, dragging him down with a scream. The second swung a bat, catching Duke on the ribs, but the dog didn't let go. Blood sprayed across the floor. Ethan fired once, the blast shaking the walls. The man with the crowbar staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Chaos exploded in the room. Shouts, crashes, the sharp snap of teeth. Duke tore free from the man he'd mauled and lunged at another, driving him toward the wall. Ethan moved like a man possessed, fighting not just for his land, but for the people asleep in the next room. One of the intruders cursed. "Forget it. Grab the kid." The words hit Ethan harder than any blow. He charged, ramming the shotgun stock into the man's jaw before he could move down the hall. Duke leapt again, pinning the last man to the ground. His growl turned into a full snarl, low and feral. For a moment, even the attackers seemed frozen, staring into the shepherd's blazing eyes. The fight ended as quickly as it started. The men scrambled, bleeding and broken, dragging each other toward the waiting truck. Duke chased them onto the porch, barking like thunder until the sound of the engine faded into the night. Ethan slammed the door shut and leaned against it, chest heaving. His ears rang, his hands shook. He looked down. Duke stood at his side, fur matted with blood, some his own, some not. The dog's chest rose and fell in ragged bursts, but his eyes stayed sharp, locked on Ethan as if asking, "Are they gone?" Ethan dropped to his knees, pulling the shepherd close. "You saved us," he whispered, voice breaking. "Damn it, boy, you saved us again." From the hallway, Anna appeared with Jack clinging to her. Tears streaked her face, but her voice was steady. "This isn't just about us anymore. Ethan Bradford's going to keep coming. He won't stop until the whole town bends." Ethan met her eyes, then looked at Duke. The shepherd lifted his head, ears still alert, like he understood every word. "No," Ethan said finally, rising to his feet. "He won't stop, but neither will we." That night, the Miller farmhouse stood battered but unbroken, and in the silence that followed, Dusty Creek itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next strike in a war that was no longer just about land. Morning came heavy, like the land itself was tired. The Miller farmhouse bore the scars of the night before, shattered door frame, blood on the floorboards, a barn wall splintered from a stray blow, but the house still stood. Ethan still stood, and so did Duke. Word spread fast in Dusty Creek. By noon, half the town had heard whispers. Bradford's men stormed the Miller's place. Ethan fought back. The shepherd nearly tore one of them apart. Some told it with awe, others with fear, but no one could ignore it anymore. Ethan stepped out onto his porch, bandages tied around his knuckles, shotgun resting across his lap. Duke lay at his feet, ribs wrapped, one eye still sharp as ever. The dog barely moved, but his ears flicked at every sound, every rustle of gravel down the road. Then came the first knock. It was Mrs. Harper, the grocer's wife, clutching a basket of bread. She set it down on the porch and spoke low. "We heard what happened. My husband says Bradford's gone too far." Her eyes darted down the road, then back to Ethan. You're not alone in this. Not anymore. Not long after Thomas, the old veteran, pulled up in his rusty truck. He carried a box of tools and a battered rifle slung over his shoulder. Figure you'll be needing both, he said, stepping inside like he belonged there. His face hardened when he saw Duke's wounds. Hell, that dog's got more fight in him than half this town. As the day dragged on, more came a young farmhand with hay still in his hair, the widow from the edge of town, holding a jug of water and shaking like a leaf. Even Sheriff Cole, usually quiet, stopped by in uniform. He didn't step onto the porch, but his words carried weight. I can't stop Bradford, he admitted. He's got money, lawyers, and half the county in his pocket. But I can look the other way when good folks defend themselves. He tipped his hat toward Duke. That mutt's got the right idea. Ethan felt something shift. For weeks, that carried the fight alone, every night waiting for the next strike. But now, the fear in people's eyes had a different edge. It was coiled tight, waiting for someone to lead it. That evening Ethan walked into the town square, Anna at his side, Jack clutching her hand. Duke limped beside him, refusing to be left behind. A small crowd gathered, drawn by whispers. Ethan raised his voice, not shouting, just steady. Bradford came to my land last night with men and weapons. He meant to break me. He meant to scare you, but he failed. He paused, looking at each face in the crowd. He's not after just me. He's after all of us, our homes, our work, our dignity. If we don't stand now, tomorrow it'll be your door he kicks in. A murmur rippled through the square. Someone shouted, he already took my cousin's farm. Another, he runs the bank, the water, everything. Ethan nodded. Then we fight back, together. We don't give him another inch. Duke barked, sharp and loud, the sound cutting through the air like a spark to dry tinder. People straightened, the fear in their eyes thinning into resolve. It wasn't a riot, not yet, but it was the first time in years Dusty Creek didn't look away. That night, torches flickered in front yards across the valley. Neighbors kept watch, not just for themselves, but for one another, and Bradford, sitting high in his mansion on the hill, saw the faint glow of firelight on the horizon. For the first time he realized control was slipping, and all because one farmer, his family, and a battered German shepherd refused to bow. Bradford wasn't a man who let humiliation slide. The night after Ethan's speech in the town square, he gathered his inner circle in the back room of the Dusty Creek Country Club, whiskey on the table, cigars burning, the air thick with smoke. One of his men/arms still in a sling from the fight at Ethan's house, spat on the floor. That damn mutt nearly took my hand off. We can't keep letting Miller walk all over us. Bradford leaned forward, his jaw tight. He's not walking over us, he's trying to turn this town against me. And some of you let it happen. His eyes swept the room until they all looked away. We put him down now or we lose everything. He laid out the plan, not another midnight scare, but a message, loud, brutal, public. Something that would remind Dusty Creek who held the reins. The next evening, Ethan was in the barn with Thomas, fixing a busted door hinge, when the sound of engines roared in the distance. Too many at once. Headlights bounced across the dirt road, kicking up a storm of dust. Anna burst out of the house, Jack clinging to her. They're coming again. Ethan dropped the hammer, grabbed the shotgun. Duke was already at the barn door, hackles raised, teeth bared. His growl vibrated through the air like a warning bell. 5 trucks rolled up, men spilling out, some holding bats, others shotguns. Bradford himself stepped down from the lead truck, dressed in a tailored coat, looking more like a banker than a thug. He shouted across the yard, Milla, this ends tonight. You've embarrassed me for the last time. Ethan raised his weapon but didn't fire. You're not taking this land. Bradford, not mine, not anyone's. Bradford sneered. You really think this town will follow a dirt farmer and his crippled dog? Watch what happens when I burn your legacy to the ground. He gave the signal. His men lit torches, hurling them toward the barn. Flames licked the dry wood, crackling to life. Anna screamed, rushing to pull Jack back. Ethan fired a warning shot, pellets scattering dirt at Bradford's feet. Step back, but Bradford's men didn't stop. One raised his shotgun, aiming at Ethan, then Duke charged. The shepherd hit him mid-stride, jaws clamping onto his wrist. The man screamed, gun dropping to the dirt. Chaos exploded. Thomas fired his old rifle, dropping another torch before it hit the house. Ethan fought with fists, shotgun, whatever he could grab. Anna dragged water from the well, trying desperately to douse the flames. Through the smoke and shouting, Duke stood like a wall, driving back every man who got too close to the house. His ribs ached, his body already battered, but he didn't falter. Finally, Headlights appeared behind the mob of the townsfolk. Trucks rolled up, horns blaring. Dozens poured out, shovels, axes, and rifles in hand. For the first time, Dusty Creek showed up not to watch, but to fight. Bradford's men hesitated, outnumbered, outshouted. The tide had turned. Ethan, dirt and blood streaked across his face, pointed at Bradford. "You're done here. This land isn't yours. It never was." Bradford looked around, saw the crowd, saw the fire in their eyes, and for the first time he didn't look untouchable. He jerked his head, toward his men. "Fall back." The trucks peeled away, leaving behind smoke, broken glass, and the faint smell of fear. Duke stood at the center of the yard, chest heaving, fur singed at the edges. He didn't move until the last taillight disappeared. Then he sank to the ground, exhausted but alive. Ethan dropped beside him, hand pressed to the dog's neck. "You did it, boy. You held them off." Around them, neighbors stomped out the last flames, voices rising in anger, not fear. Bradford had struck harder than ever, but instead of breaking Dusty Creek, he had lit the fuse, and now there was no turning back. Dusty Creek had been quiet for too long. People whispered in corners, avoided eye contact, and kept their heads down whenever Bradford's name came up. But the night he tried to burn the Miller farm, that silence cracked wide open. By sunrise, the whole town was talking angry, loud, unafraid. The blackened barn, the broken windows, the smell of smoke clinging to Ethan's fields had become a symbol. Bradford had crossed the line, and everyone knew it. Thomas drove through town in his rusty pickup, Duke sitting tall in the passenger seat despite his bandages. The sight of the old veteran and the battered shepherd turned heads. Folks nodded, some even cheered. For the first time in years, Dusty Creek felt alive. At the diner, Ethan stood before a packed crowd. Men who'd lost their farms, women forced to take Bradford's unfair loans, workers underpaid at his mills, they were all there. The air buzzed with a mix of anger and hope. Ethan didn't dress it up. "Bradford thinks he owns us. Last night he tried to burn my family out. He'll do the same to you if we let him. But if we stand together, he can't touch us. Not anymore." A murmur of agreement rolled through the room. Then someone shouted from the back, "He took my brother's land." Another voice, "He cut off our water." One by one, people stood and spoke, their fear turning into fury. Duke barked loud and sharp, cutting through the noise. The dog stood at Ethan's side like a soldier at attention. The crowd fell quiet, eyes drawn to him. In that silence, it was clear. The fight wasn't just about land. It was about dignity, survival, and finally saying enough. Plans formed quickly. Farmers agreed to block the roads leading to Bradford's estate. Workers vowed to walk off his construction sites. The sheriff, tired of being Bradford's puppet, promised he'd no longer enforce his dirty deeds. That evening, the town marched together. Dozens of trucks lined the dirt road toward Bradford's mansion, headlights blazing in the dusk. At the front was Ethan's old pickup, with Duke standing in the bed, ears perked, eyes locked on the hill. Bradford's guards waited at the gate, shotguns in hand. But when they saw the crowd, neighbors, families, workers armed with rifles, axes, even pitchforks, they hesitated. No paycheck was worth facing a town that had finally found its backbone. Bradford himself stormed out onto the porch, red-faced and shouting, "You think you can take me down? I own this land, this town, every damn one of you." Ethan stepped forward, voice steady but carrying across the yard. "Not anymore. This town belongs to its people. We're done being scared of you." The crowd roared in agreement, a sound so loud Bradford actually stepped back, and then Duke leapt down from the truck, standing between Ethan and the mansion, barking with a fury that shook the night. The people surged forward, not with chaos, but with unity. Bradford's empire cracked right there on his front lawn. It wasn't untouchable anymore. He was just one man against a town that had finally risen, and at the center of it all was a German shepherd who refused to back down. The standoff at Bradford's mansion stretched long into the night. Dozens of headlights lit the hillside, casting the big house in a harsh glow. The people of Dusty Creek stood shoulder to shoulder, farmers, mechanics, shopkeepers, mothers, with their children by their sides. No one moved back, not this time. Bradford's guards shifted uneasily. They were armed, but the crowd was larger, louder, and filled with a fire they hadn't seen before. Some of the guards even lowered their guns, realizing they weren't fighting criminals, they were facing their own neighbors. Bradford stormed down the steps, veins bulging on his neck. "You're making a mistake. I built this town. Without me, you'd have nothing." His voice cracked with rage, but it no longer carried the weight it once did. Ethan stepped forward. His shirt was torn, his face bruised from the attack on his farm, but his voice was clear. "You didn't build this town. We did. Every acre tilled, every board nailed, every drop of sweat belongs to us, and we're done letting you steal it." The crowd roared in agreement. Bradford's face twisted in fury. He reached for a shotgun one of his men had dropped, but before he could aim, Duke bolted forward like a bullet. The shepherd slammed into him, teeth snapping inches from his wrist, knocking the weapon to the dirt. Bradford stumbled back, tripping over the steps. Sprawled and helpless, gasps and shouts rippled through the crowd. Duke stood over Bradford, growling low, chest heaving, eyes locked on him. The once powerful man who had ruled with fear was now pinned by nothing more than the courage of a dog. Bradford tried to bluster, voice shaking. You'll all regret this. I have lawyers, judges." But the sheriff, standing among the people, finally stepped forward. His badge caught the light. "Not anymore. Bradford, you've broken too many laws, hurt too many lives. Tonight, it ends." Two deputies who had come with the townsfolk pushed through the crowd and cuffed Bradford. His protests turned to desperate shouting, but no one listened. The people weren't afraid anymore. Ethan knelt beside Duke, running a hand through his matted fur. "It's over. Boy, you did it." The dog wagged his tail weakly, ears still sharp, as if making sure Bradford was really gone. The crowd erupted cheers, tears, arms raised in triumph. For the first time in years, Dusty Creek felt free. Families hugged. Strangers shook hands. Thomas, the old veteran, lifted his voice above the noise. "This is what happens when folks stand together." Duke barked once, loud and clear, and the sound carried over the valley like a battle cry. It wasn't just victory, it was a promise that Dusty Creek would never bow to tyranny again. On the mansion steps, Ethan looked out over his neighbors. "This land belongs to the people, and as long as we stand together, no man will ever take it from us again." The crowd answered with thunderous cheers, and above it all, the battered German shepherd stood proud, a living reminder that loyalty, courage, and unity could bring even the most powerful tyrant to his knees. Dusty Creek looked different after Bradford was gone. The streets that once felt heavy with fear now carried the sound of laughter and the buzz of rebuilding. People worked side by side, patching fences, painting storefronts, fixing what had been broken. For the first time in years, they weren't looking over their shoulders. Ethan stood at the edge of his field, hands resting on the old wooden fence. Anna was nearby, showing Jack how to plant a row of seeds. Duke sat right between them, chest high, watching every move like a guardian. He had a small scar on his ear from the night of the fight, but it only made him look prouder. Neighbors stopped by often. Some brought tools, some brought food, and some just came to shake Ethan's hand. Nobody saw him as just a farmer anymore. He was the man who stood his ground when others were too scared, too. And Duke, people whispered his name like he was more legend than dog. Kids sketched him in notebooks, and someone even painted him on the wall of the diner with the words, "The Guardian of Dusty Creek." At the town square, a small gathering was held. Sheriff Lane stood in front of the crowd. He looked older, more humbled than before. "I failed this town for too long," he admitted, his voice carrying through the cool morning air. "But thanks to all of you, we proved something important. Justice isn't given, it's fought for, and it will be protected here from now on." Behind him, townsfolk had set up a simple wooden plaque. It read, "On this ground, the people of Dusty Creek stood together and chose freedom over fear." As the crowd clapped, Ethan felt Jack tug at his sleeve. "Dad, does this mean Bradford's gone forever?" Ethan looked at his son, then at Anna, and finally at Duke sitting strong by their side. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, son, he's not coming back. And if anyone ever tries again," he patted Duke on the head, "they'll find out Dusty Creek doesn't bow down anymore." The sun was rising, painting the sky with streaks of gold and orange. People lingered in the square, talking, planning, dreaming. For the first time in a long time, Dusty Creek had a future. And standing right at the heart of it all was a farmer, his family, and a dog who had proven that loyalty and courage could change everything.